Hey guys, what's up? So everyone's heard about The Hobbit and a lot of people have read The Hobbit, and The Hobbit's been a huge, big fantasy story for a long time. And I read this years ago, and what's interesting about like books like The Hobbit, where everyone's like saying, "Oh, this is the best book ever. You got to read this book." Every time you have these like expectations, you're always like, I expected this amazing thing and it was okay, it was good, but you know what? It wasn't exactly what everyone was saying. It was a good book, definitely, but I think it's just a lot of fans of The Hobbit just saying it's the best book ever, JRR Tolkien is the best author ever, and everything like that. And at the time, like, what's interesting is I've read other fantasy books, and I find that people that read The Hobbit, there's people that read The Hobbit that read other fantasy books, and there's like people that read The Hobbit that read very, very few fantasy books, and maybe that they've read The Hobbit, the reason they liked it is because it does have fantasy in it. It's cool, it's people that like haven't read a lot of fantasy, I think, but whatever, like, it's cool either way. But what's interesting about The Hobbit and about that story is I found that the other characters in the story are more interesting than the Hobbit himself, than Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo is the Hobbit, and in Lord of the Rings it was Frodo, right? They were brothers or something like that, right? Or some kind, they were relative, they were related to each other. But the thing is this, it's like I'm reading and like the main character is Bilbo the Hobbit. It's called The Hobbit, right? And Bilbo's the main character, and he's this like short little Hobbit dude. He's a halfling, basically. Like, he's like really short, big feet with hair on him, big hairy feet, and little guy. And they live in these like mushroom houses. They're sort of like the Smurfs. They live in these mushroom houses with round doors, and there's always like they eat like 8 times a day, and they just like to relax and have fun and enjoy themselves and eat more, and then enjoy themselves more and sleep and eat more. So that was cool. But I did find that the other characters in the story were just way more interesting than the actual Hobbit. Like Gandalf and the elves, they were so much more interesting. But anyway, the Hobbit starts off with their life inside the Hobbit Village. And honestly, like, it was just about they're having fireworks, and they're having banquets, and they eat like 8 times a day, and all this different stuff is happening. And I felt like it took a really, really, really long time for anything to really happen in the story, that the author was talking about this Hobbit village and life inside the Hobbit village for way too long. It was just, I don't even know, like, it was like either the full chapter about that, or it was like a few chapters about that. And it wasn't even like, you didn't even like know who this Hobbit was or anything, but you did know kind of like who these different Hobbits were, and they sort of had their own personalities, and that kind of reminded me of the Seven Dwarves, because they kind of did have those like dwarf-like personalities, where certain Hobbits had a certain personality, and they were known for like a certain thing, whether that was a good trait or a bad trait, and stuff like that. And it was just like this story about these little halflings, these little guys that kind of just like don't do anything. They stay in their village. They never go out of the village. They like kind of have their little life, and that's kind of how it goes, that's as much as was what's happening. And they really, I feel like the author talked about that for way too long. It was just description and description and description of fireworks, inter-Hobbit, inter-halfling politics, different kind of standout personalities of some of the other Hobbits that actually were never in any more of the story. And all of that like description kind of went nowhere. It would just describe the Hobbit in town, but it had nothing to do with the actual story that the Hobbit was going to go on. And then Gandalf comes over, and he's an interesting character. And I really did think that Gandalf, I mean, if you could say, I think it's ripping off Merlin, because Gandalf was exactly Merlin. Came out of nowhere, wise old wizard, came back from a quest. He's got his secret little quest that he's on, and he's trying to do his thing. and that's when they first talked about the ring and all that stuff like that. I didn't think the ring was that big of a thing inside the Hobbit, and it really wasn't that thing. The ring was the magical item inside the Hobbit, but I don't think that was the point of the story. I think it's just that the Hobbit, that the Bilbo needed the ring to survive through his adventure, because they're really not strong characters. I mean, it's not really, they're little guys, and they're coming across, with the enemy. They're fighting like golems and these monsters like wraiths and stuff on horseback that are trying to kill him, and obviously, like, he's just a little hobbit. He's not like meant to adventure. He's not a hero. He's not meant to go out into the world. Doesn't have a chance going on that kind of quest until he finds his magical weapons, the ring and the sword. And then, like, also there's a lot of magic once they meet the elves. And I did feel like, yeah, it's cool that it was okay that I feel like they ripped Merlin off, because that wizard was exactly Merlin. But that's okay, because Merlin is the quintessential wizard, and like, you could say any wizard is sort of Merlin, but so to the degree that he ripped off Merlin, I don't know. But it was did kind of rip off. And then the sword, of course, the same story with Merlin. There was Excalibur, and this story also had a sword. But that's okay also, because I guess, if you're going to put every fantasy story has to have a wizard and a sword, so that's fine. But I did feel like that Bilbo was not qualified for the adventure that he went on, and he had to really find like the hero inside of himself, which would never have happened without the sword and the ring. And so that's kind of interesting in itself, that he really wasn't a hero, but these magical items made him a hero. Like, without the magical items, like, he would really, like, he had a much lower chance of succeeding in his quest, in his journey throughout the book, if he did not have the sword that told him when evil was approaching, the wraiths were approaching, the sword would tell him this, and then the ring that made him invisible so that they couldn't see him. So that's cool. The thing about the ring is that, it gives the person who wears it power, but at the same time, it's evil, and it will corrupt the person as a person. Like, it'll give them power, but at the same time corrupt somebody. So it's something that, like, it's interesting, because, like, now you're thinking it's sort of like the choice. It's sort of like this choice that the hero has, where power, but corrupted power, or no power and no corruption, And what's interesting is that ring made a lot of sense, because power corrupts, and that, I think, is the symbolism, and that's the meaning of the ring, sort of. In a way, it's a good way of explaining this kind of trope, this kind of thing in philosophy and in culture and everything, that you cannot have power without it sort of corrupting you. With every power, there's always corruption. And like they say, like sometimes they say, well, with great power comes great responsibility. But the ring says, with great power comes corruption. And what's interesting about that is that you can in the story, you can obtain power without corruption, as long as you don't use the ring to obtain power. The ring gives you the power, but it also messes you up, like what it did with Golem. Golem used to be a furry, fun-loving hobbit. He was one of the hobbits, and he got this ring, and I think Golem didn't know that the ring was corrupting him. I think at the time, because Gandalf had to tell Bilbo that this ring corrupts. Don't use the ring. Get rid of it. Don't use it. Don't put it on. It's bad. And so I don't know if with Golem, if he knew about that. Like, he had his ring, he loved it, he kept it, but it messed him up. It made him, like, be by himself. Like, he didn't like any company. He couldn't talk. He lived underground in a cave. by himself, and it really messed him up. And he could see nothing beyond this ring, his precious ring. And who cares if this ring has magic power if you're not enjoying your life? If you're not also have more to your life besides the ring. And what the ring does, it gives you that power, but it takes away everything else that's not the ring, so that you can't have it all. You can have no ring and kind of have a decent life and enjoy a natural life and friends and food and things that you enjoy. But then if you try to take the power of the ring, now it's like, yes, you get this power, but it'll take everything else from you. So it gives you that choice. Do you want just the powerful ring with nothing else, or do you want everything but the ring? It's an interesting choice that the ring kind of gives you. And in all honesty, it doesn't even give you that choice. It actually tries to control you into choosing the ring over choosing your life and to live your life normally. So Gollum was kind of like a slave to the ring, because the ring is so powerful that you couldn't be as powerful as that ring. It would enslave you. It would take a regular hobbit and make it into a golem that was everything was gone. Like, Gollum had nothing. He lived by himself underground, But then they had the cool sword, which was that sword, right? And the sword would light up when there was danger, when there was wraiths. And also, that's interesting that, I like the sword. I thought that was interesting, and then, because he had to, basically, he was able to defeat the wraiths. He'd hide from the wraiths with the sword and stuff like that. And I found that the sword was interesting. I found that, the ring was actually the interesting part of the story. Gollum was the interesting part of the story, that the sword that Bilbo used was interesting part of the story. And the adventure he went on, the adventure was kind of interesting, because they were he went to he stayed overnight at one of the kind of hotel bar saloon places that they used to have. So a medieval kind of place where he would stay there. He met elves. That was interesting, because the elves there was a whole society of elves that I really liked. How the author explained these elves, how the author talked about elves and stuff like that. And there was a whole society of elves, and they were sophisticated, and I really did like the elves more than the hobbits. And then there were dwarves also, and they were kind of interesting too, but they were kind of funny, and so the hobbits were also kind of funny. And and I really didn't think, I liked the elves a lot, and I liked Gandalf a lot because he's a wizard. And I just found that the main character was really not as interesting as the other things in the story. And it kind of you're not really rooting for that main character. You don't really I just don't see how that main character is just, to me, it's I don't see how it's that interesting. He's not a hero. Definitely not a hero. And without the magic weapons and magic items, he wouldn't be able to go on his quest, on his journey. And, he wouldn't be able to. And so what I thought about the story was, there was not enough about the other interesting characters. And he could have, I feel like he focused on JRR Tolkien, focused kind of on the wrong things. The story that he told had a lot of interesting things about it, but he focused too much on the wrong things. He focused a lot on the main character, Bilbo, but I didn't think he was that interesting. Gandalf was a more interesting character, but he didn't focus on Gandalf. He didn't say a lot about Gandalf. Gandalf was this mysterious character that came and went. And then the elves, he really didn't focus on the elves. He talked about the elves, the elven society and things like that, but he didn't actually go in there and have an elf main character come out of it. He didn't have a few chapters where it was Gandalf's adventure, where Gandalf was going across. He focused on the Hobbit, and I think that the Hobbit, just in my opinion, is just not that interesting of a character. You could focus on the Hobbit, but then there's a lot of stuff that was just unfocused on, like Gandalf, like the elves. The dwarves were kind of interesting, but they were also kind of short and stocky, and they were kind of like whimsical. They were kind of like, they weren't real, because the danger and the evil was real. The wraiths were real. They were trying to like kill Bilbo. They were trying to like get rid of him. The evil sorcerers, they were real too, and there was a lot of there was a lot of evil. There was a lot of monsters. The monsters were cool, but the thing is, they didn't have a lot of personality, and there wasn't enough of a story about the monsters and everything else. In my opinion, I think that The Hobbit was a better story than Lord of the Rings, and I really do think that part of the reason for this is that, like, if the Lord of the Rings didn't have to be a trilogy, it could have just been one book, and that would have been a lot better, because he went on and talked a lot about, he just created more and more of a story and just kept going with it and tried to make the story as big as possible, because I think his publishers, is what I heard, his publishers wanted him to write a trilogy instead of one book, and The Lord of the Rings was one book. In my opinion, The Hobbit was a better book, and in my opinion also, I think that maybe the author was trying to say that the main character was not a strong character, but became strong because of the help that he got at the time. Like, he wouldn't be able to do it alone. He couldn't come across, he couldn't stand against this evil by himself. I mean, he was called upon to stand up against evil, the evil forces in the book, and by himself he wouldn't be able to do it. But if he had Gandalf, if he had a wizard, if he had elves, if he had dwarves with him, if he had those tree people that were like, those are cool. The tree people were cool. Then, and he had some magic weapons. That was cool. Just like, that came, just like the old, like, the old story with Perseus and Medusa, and that whole story where, the gods gave Perseus all of these weapons, because Perseus would not have been able to, defeat Medusa without the sword, the shield, the helmet that made him invisible. Exactly, like, yeah, the helmet made him invisible. It was just like such a copy of that story, but okay. But Perseus wouldn't have been able to do it alone. But he was a heroic character. He was a heroic person, and I think that what he's saying is, the author is saying that it doesn't matter about the strength or weakness of the main character. What matters is the help that they got, the help that they get, and the magic items and the choices they make when wielding these magic items can create that, like, any character, any like non-heroic character can become a heroic character by making good decisions, befriending other powerful characters, and gaining magic weapons, which is cool. But honestly, to me, I just don't think, I think that he could have made Bilbo a better character if he would have just, I don't know, like maybe made him a little bit stronger or something like that, but who knows? Maybe that was the intention, I don't know. So, but in my opinion, the book, I wasn't on board with Bilbo. I wasn't on board with the main character, and I felt that, he wasn't powerful. I felt that, like, the weapons and the magic items weren't that original or that great. It was just a ring. It's not a big, it wasn't like, it's just a ring that gave you power, made you invisible, but also, like, enslaved you to be its owner, And a sword, it wasn't even like it lit up when there was danger. It's okay, you could have made it. It's like, yeah, they're kind of like magic weapons and magic items, but whatever. So yeah, so that's what I felt about it. Like Bilbo was kind of a main character. I don't think it was good or heroic. the wizard, you know, he was a good character, but he was kind of there, and he wasn't really there, and there wasn't a lot of story about him. And then like the elves, they were kind of there also, but they also like there wasn't a lot about them. They were so interesting, but there's like wasn't too much about the elves, and I just felt like the writer kind of wrote about the wrong things and stuff like that. I think he could have made a better book, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Did you like the Hobbit? What did you think about it? Did you like, have you read like Lord of the Rings or Hobbit or anything like that? I'm just talking about the Hobbit, but let me know in the comments. Let me know if you thought about the book, if you've read it, what you thought about the story, the main characters, anything like that. Check out my other videos. Like and subscribe to my channel and like my video. And check out my other videos if you want, and you can share this video if you want to do that also. And yeah, so enjoy, and I will see you guys in another video later.